The voicemail began with his laugh, and ended the marriage I thought I had. My name is Lydia Carrington, and I used to believe in tidy lives. I believed in polished kitchens, folded towels, and Sunday dinners where the table felt heavy with kindness. My husband, Thomas, loved that part of me. He said it made the house breathe easier. He said the quiet I carried made him brave at work. I thought our steadiness was a pact. I thought I knew the sound of every door in our home. That night, his phone rattled across the marble island while I rinsed blueberries. I had not set out to trespass. The phone was set to share notifications with our home speaker, a convenience we both liked. A little bubble flashed on the screen, then the speaker clicked awake, then a voice I did not know began to speak. I froze with the colander in my hands, water running over my wrists, and listened. "Hey, it's me," the woman said, as if the house itself belonged to her. The message was not indecent, not breathless or crude. It was worse than that. It was soft. She talked about a book he had recommended, how she had underlined a sentence. She thanked him for a breakfast at a place I thought only we loved. She described the way he listened. She said his laugh stayed with her all day. She would keep it for later, she said, like a match you never strike. I stood there with the blueberries soaking, and the sink's slow hiss sounded like rain on a roof I no longer trusted. When the message ended, silence returned like a stranger who had discovered a spare key. I wiped my hands, turned off the faucet, and picked up his phone. The call log showed a contact with a first name and a dash. It was the kind of name a person uses when they have built a private hallway between two rooms of their life. The voicemail was saved, not deleted. He had kept it the way you keep a note under your pillow. I stared at the screen until my reflection in the glass looked like a question. I did not cry. Crying felt like the wrong language for what had just happened. My chest felt tight, though, as if a new seam had been stitched too hard across my ribs. I slid the phone back to where it had vibrated. The kitchen clock kept time like it always did. The dog lifted his head, sniffed, and settled again. When Thomas came home, he kissed my cheek and asked about my day. I told him the spinach had gone limp in the refrigerator. He laughed, and his laugh sounded exactly like the one she had saved. I felt my skin pull away from itself, the way fabric sometimes shrinks in a hot wash. He talked about a meeting. He said the board loved his presentation. He said he might be late tomorrow. I poured wine and asked about the weather. After he went to shower, I washed the blueberries again. The water spread cold across my fingers, and I let it run until it felt like a ritual. Somewhere upstairs, his phone pinged, and another message arrived behind a closed door. I turned off the faucet and dried the colander with a towel that suddenly felt too clean. I did not confront him. I did not shout or throw a glass. Instead, I opened the back door and stood on the steps, watching our small maple shake in the breeze. The evening was almost kind enough to believe. But the quiet had changed. Every sound wore a shadow. In that new hush, I understood something simple and terrible. I had not lost him tonight. I had noticed that I was already alone. The days that followed moved like furniture without felt pads. Every movement scraped. I still made coffee at 6. I still tied my hair back at the sink and watered the basil in the window. I taught my students at the community center, all those women who brought their folded worries and left with their shoulders loose. I told them that stories can hold what life cannot. I watched my own story harden. Thomas grew gentler, the way a thief is with a vase he plans to take. He sent sweet texts during meetings, as if someone were watching him from a high balcony. He began wearing a new cologne that smelled like night and cedar, and he called me Lyd, the way he had when we were 25. It felt like a rehearsal for a role he had once loved. I answered politely. I kept my voice steady, as if steadiness could fix what steadiness had allowed. At book club, I listened while friends argued about a novel's betrayal. The room warmed with opinions. Someone joked that men were simple and women were complicated. I smiled because it was easier than speaking. Later, a friend squeezed my arm at the sink and asked if I was happy. I said I was tired, which was true and not complete. On the way home, the car felt like a long hallway. The streetlights ran past like beads slipping through fingers. I tried to blame the voicemail on something smaller than hunger. Maybe she was only a friend. Maybe the breakfast was a goodbye. Maybe the softness had been a test and he had passed it. But the messages continued. Not every night, but enough to teach me a new calendar. Thursdays became sharp. Mondays grew watchful. He kept the phone face down at dinner. He kept ringtones off in the living room. I learned the choreography of lies. The isolation was not only between us. It moved into the edges of my day. I found myself doing chores with care that felt like prayer, stacking bowls with deliberate kindness, choosing parsley with the patience of a surgeon. If I could make the kitchen honest, maybe the house would forgive him. If I could align the quilts, maybe the bed would forget. Some evenings, I walked with our neighbor, Ana Morales. She teaches orchestra at the middle school and has a way of hearing what is not said. We walked 2 blocks and back, talking about the weather and a student who refused to play anything but the low notes. I envied the clarity of music. Notes told the truth about their length. The sky would darken, and we would stop at her mailbox. She would ask, casually, how I was. I would say, casually, fine. She would watch me as if she were measuring the distance between a downbeat and a late entrance. At night, Thomas worked late, and I stayed inside the house like a witness. The dog slept and dreamt about running. I checked the stove twice. I smoothed the duvet. I resisted the urge to call the woman whose voice had entered our kitchen uninvited. I pictured her mouth forming my husband's name. I pictured the way she might watch herself in a window. Part of me wanted to scream until the windows blew inward. Most of me wanted to be sure. When he finally slept, I lay awake beside him, listening for the smallest changes in his breath. Trust is not a switch. It is a muscle that knots when it is ignored. I could feel mine seizing up. I wanted to be the version of myself who asked a clean question and accepted a clean answer. Instead, I turned inward. I promised something to the dark, and to myself. I would not rage. I would not plead. I would not be the woman who flung her life against his secrets. If this had a truth, I would find it. I would choose my steps and set them down like stones across a river, one quiet at a time. I whispered that vow into the pillow, and felt it settle like a key in a pocket. The proof arrived in pieces, as if the world respected the pace of my resolve. The next Thursday, Thomas left for a conference in Cleveland. He packed a navy suit and the tie I had given him when he made partner. He kissed my forehead and asked if I wanted him to bring back that chocolate he always brings. I said sure, and watched him drive away with the confidence of a man who believes in his own routine. I did not follow him. I opened the drawer where we keep the warranties and manuals and found our joint phone bill. I circled a number that had become a chord in my head. It repeated like the refrain of a song I did not request. I called our bank and asked for a printed record of recent charges, a thing any wife can do when her name is on the account. Twice in the last month, he had paid at a hotel that sits by the river, where the windows are tall and the lobby smells like velvet. The clerk at the bank did not flinch. She did not know the scent of that lobby the way I did. I breathed, then kept breathing. The next step was not a trap, it was a door. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer listed by a friend long ago for a reason that now felt like preparation. Her name was Marin Cole. Her office had a window that looked onto a brick wall, and a lamp that cast a patient light. She listened without interruption. When I finished, she asked 2 questions. Did I have a recording? Did I have proof of recent charges? I nodded. She smiled, not unkindly, as if she knew the weight of steady women. You don't strike me as someone who wants a war, she said. I want a clean table, I said. And my hands back. Marin explained terms like dissipation and equitable distribution, practical language that made me feel less like a character in a melodrama and more like a person who could stand up and leave a room. She told me not to move money, not to confront him yet, to keep a timeline and collect copies. She told me to change the passwords on the accounts that are mine alone. Her printer hummed and slid me a folder. Inside lay a checklist and a calm future. I left her office lighter, but not freer. Freedom was coming, and it needed care. At home, I called Anna. I did not give her everything. I told her only that I had found messages, and that I was taking counsel. She took a breath shaped like grief. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She asked if I wanted company. I did. We sat at my kitchen table where the blueberries had once drowned. Anna put her hand over mine, and we were quiet. Finally, she said, you have always made room for other people. Make room for yourself now. It was not advice. It was a benediction. That night, the house felt different. The quiet did not accuse me anymore. It joined me. I pulled the voicemail into a small folder on my laptop, labeled it with the date, and wrote down what I remembered hearing. I printed the bank charges and slid them behind the folder in my desk. I took pictures of the call log numbers, knowing how quickly digital things disappear when shame drives them. I slept better than I expected, and woke before the sun. In the early light, I brewed tea and watched steam climb. I pictured the lobby of the River Hotel and the way the clerk might say, "Welcome back." The idea did not break me. It moved me. When Thomas returned 2 days later with the chocolate I had requested, I thanked him, and put the box in the pantry behind the flour. He poured wine and told me Cleveland was boring. He said the river there was beautiful in a drab way. I stood at the sink and felt every part of myself begin to align. There would be a conversation. There would be a choosing. But before that, there would be preparation. I made a new vow, the companion to the first. When the truth walked into our kitchen, it would find me standing, not shaking. It would find me ready, and it would leave without needing to slam a door. We met in the late afternoon because the light was honest then. I set 2 glasses on the island and filled them with water, not wine. The dog slept by the back door, and the house smelled faintly of lemon. Thomas walked in from work loosened by the long day. He kissed the air near my cheek and reached for the fridge. I asked him to sit. He did, because that was who we had been. There's something we need to hear, I said, and pressed play. His laugh arrived first, that bright coin flicked into a well. The woman's voice followed, careful, practiced, certain of having been welcomed before. She thanked him for the suite overlooking the water. She said she had kept the room key because it felt like proof that life could still surprise her. She said she had never told anyone a secret as easily as she told him. The message ended. The kitchen resumed its old breathing. Thomas did not speak for several seconds. He looked at me as if I had sprouted a second face. Then he said, "Lydia." He said it in a tone that had once made me put down knives. I waited. "It's not what you think," he said. "It was what all men say when it is exactly what you think." "It is exactly what I think," I said. "And it is more than that." He reached for my hand. I moved it to the base of my glass. I had prepared for this moment the way people prepare for storms. I had batteries and water and a map. He tried another path. "It was a hard year," he said. "Work has been relentless." I felt unseen. I Don't use my kindness as your alibi, I said, quietly. The sentences felt like clean, carved wood. I know about the hotel. I know about the calls. I know enough. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a fish deciding which direction is even water. We can fix this, he said. I already did, I said, and placed the folder on the island. Inside were copies and the phone records, the bank charges, a letter drafted by Marin with my name in the right places. A proposed separation plan that respected our years and named the lines he had crossed. The house would remain with me. The car he loved would not. Retirement accounts would be split. There were provisions for a dog who likes the south-facing window and for a man who would be leaving with more shirts than honesty. He touched the papers and flinched as if they burned. You talked to a lawyer, he said. I talked to a future, I said. The dialogue stopped then, because there was nothing else to say that had not been said by the facts. He paged through the documents with a speed that tried to outrun consequence. He looked up, and his face softened into something like memory. I never wanted to hurt you, he said. You wanted to be adored twice, I said. You can afford only once. I did not raise my voice. I did not list every moment that would now be relabeled. I watched the dog lift his head, consider the air, and return to easy sleep. Thomas asked if the woman knew about this. I said her knowledge did not matter. He asked if we could wait, if we could go to counseling, if I could understand how this happened. I said I did understand. It happened because he decided I would catch him. I decided I would not. He signed the temporary agreement that night because he wanted Mercy to still be part of his story. His pen shook. Mine did not. When it was done, the house did not cheer. It settled. He asked if he could sleep in the guest room. I handed him the clean sheets I had folded 2 days earlier and placed at the top of the closet. He paused in the doorway. Do you hate me? He asked. I don't carry that kind of weight, I said. He nodded, because he knows I speak only what I can carry. He walked down the hall, a man learning the sound of his own footsteps. I rinsed the glasses and set them in the drying rack like a small ceremony. The lemon and the air remained. The kitchen felt, if not new, then corrected. Justice did not clang its cymbals. It sat beside me, still and precise, and asked nothing more. Morning came with no drama. The light found the maple in the yard and turned it to gold. I brewed coffee and did not check his phone, because it was no longer a part of my breath. In the quiet, I felt my body remember its old dimensions. Grief is not a storm you survive. It is a climate you learn to dress for. I put on a sweater and opened the back door. In the garden, the basil stood tall from weeks of care. I pinched the tips and made a small pile on the cutting board. The dog trotted the fence line like a gentle guard. Somewhere down the block, Anna's violin students were practicing scales. The notes rose and fell, earnest and plain. I closed my eyes and listened to their effort. Music, like truth, does not exist to soothe us. It exists to instruct. Later, Anna came by with coffee and a bag of oranges. We stood at the counter and made a mess with peels. I told her what had happened, and she shook her head with admiration that belonged not to me, but to the piece I had chosen. You didn't set the house on fire, she said. You turned on every light. There were practical hours to manage. Calls with Marin. A locksmith scheduled for next week. Emails about the workshop I will teach this summer. I made lists and drew little squares beside every item, a habit from childhood that reassures me that order can be made from wind. I crossed off what was finished, and did not rush what remained. Thomas moved out 2 weeks later. He took the framed photo from his college days and the shirts I never liked. He left the coffee grinder because he knows I make better coffee. He carried a box past the maple while I watered the porch fern. We did not speak. There was nothing unkind in that silence. He loaded his car and paused at the curb, as if expecting a wave goodbye. I did not wave. He drove away with the carefulness of someone guiding a heavy truth. There is beauty, I learned, in a house after a storm. The air holds more space. The floorboards stop listening for footsteps that do not land. I moved the couch 2 inches and felt the room breathe different. I pulled the pantry apart and discovered jars that had expired quietly during our good years. I threw away what could no longer nourish anyone. I kept the rest. On Sundays, I go to the farmer's market and buy flowers that look like small suns. I leave one in Anna's mailbox because gratitude has a shape. In the afternoons, I sit with my students and talk about how to write endings. We agree that endings must honor beginnings without pretending to repair them. One woman brings me a poem about a river that refuses to bend. Another writes a paragraph about a room made new by emptiness. We read, and the room grows warmer without anyone touching the thermostat. At night, I walk the dog beneath a sky that is honest about its distance. I think about the woman whose voice once stepped into my kitchen. I do not hate her. She was not the architect of my loss. She was a mirror that made me check the line of my own face. If she is with Thomas, I hope she knows the parts of him I loved, and the parts one could not carry. If she is not, I hope she finds a home that does not require whispers to feel alive. Some days I replay the voicemail, not to punish myself, but to thank the moment that saved me time. In its softness, I hear now a clarity that I mistook for threat. It was a bell ringing in a fog. It gave me the one thing I lacked. It made me sure. I do not need it anymore. One morning soon, I will delete it, and the space it leaves behind will be another room I can furnish with light. Last week, Marin called to say the settlement was final. Her voice was dry and kind. We spoke about logistics. We did not speak about the long quiet between my ribs that had finally loosened. After we hung up, I opened the back door and stood on the steps the way I had on the night the voicemail first arrived. The maple shook in a friendly wind. I did not feel watched by my own house. I felt welcomed. I tell this story because someone might be standing at a sink right now, listening to water and fear. Maybe you have a blueberry stain on your thumb. Maybe your kitchen feels like a witness instead of a shelter. If you are there, know that you are not poor in choices. You are rich in small doors. You can open them with a steady hand. You can step through. The quiet revenge I chose was not to tear him down. It was to become unliftable by anyone's carelessness. I set my life down where my hands could reach it. I learned which sounds were mine, and which would no longer enter my rooms. In the morning light, the basil smells like hope. The coffee blooms. The floorboards hold me without asking what I will bring them. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.